It's 7:30 p.m. on December the 21st, 1988. It was a cold and stormy night in Edinburgh, Scotland. It was a pretty typical evening in the emergency department. That was until the red emergency phone rings. It's the first time the red phone has ever rung. It's the police, and the news is utterly shocking. A jumbo jet has crashed in the town of Lockerbie. Hundreds of people are feared dead, and Tony Bonner, a trauma nurse for the Rapid Response Unit Medic 1, is ordered straight to the crash to search for survivors with his team.
And we were terrified, and the biggest challenge that an accident emergency or a trauma nurse or doctor has is when you bite off the big one, have you got what it takes? And I think we all felt that this was the biggest one ever, and we didn't really know if we could function in these circumstances or not.
As they searched Lockerbie, out of the darkness, a mangled cockpit of a jumbo jet appeared, lying in a field filled with sheep. This was a night that Tony wouldn't soon forget.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Ordinary Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Chris Barron, and each week I sit down with a guest whose job is far from ordinary. We'll explore how they got there, what it's really like behind the scenes, and then they'll reveal the single most unforgettable experience of their career. In today's episode, I'm joined by someone who was actually one of the initial inspirations for this podcast. Tony Bonner has a fascinating and twisting career journey, from seminary school to psychiatric nursing to becoming a criminal prosecutor later in life. And full disclosure, he is also my uncle. Tony's unforgettable story happened in December 1988. At the time, he was part of Medic 1, which is Scotland's legendary rapid response trauma unit. That night, he and the team were called to one of the worst air disasters in history, the Lockerbie bombing. So in this two-part episode, Tony vividly recounts his Lockerbie story for the first time on record and reveals how his career shifted after that really extraordinary experience. Please subscribe now so you don't miss out when part 2 comes out next week. With all that said, I am super excited to bring you guys this story. You're listening to No Ordinary Monday. Let's get into the show. All right, Tony Bonner, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time today. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Good.
Yeah, good. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time for this podcast. It's fantastic to have you because I know that what's great for me is that you're my uncle. So I know you a wee bit, and I know you've got a fascinating tale, especially when it comes to the jobs you've done before. I think just to list off a few things, you were there at the Lockerbie first response to the Lockerbie bombing, which a lot of people will be very familiar with. You went on to have an entirely new career after that, being a procurator fiscal, or what you call it for a more international term for that.
A district attorney would be the American equivalent, or just a prosecutor.
So a criminal lawyer, a criminal prosecutor.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've had a fascinating career, and I think that's what's brilliant is that hopefully we can cover a bit of ground and you can share a bit with that for us. So I guess where I want to start is right at the beginning. What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you obviously looking back now, it was maybe a little bit different when you were 7 or 8.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the absolute honest truth, Chris. I didn't have a first idea what I wanted to do. My childhood was interrupted by when I was 11. My parents sent me to a seminary, which was a preparatory college to become a Catholic priest from a Catholic family. And I was only 11, and I was away from home for the next 3.5 years. which were all kind of my formative years. They took me out of high school at the end of second year and dropped me back in it at the start of sixth year. And so I had my formative years were strange. So I was probably had more jokes in Latin than I did in anything else, which was, a sad admission. But it meant that I arrived in high school at the age of 17 and I didn't have a clue about anything. Girls, careers, nothing.
Up until that point, it was a very religious trajectory.
Yeah. But the bizarre thing about it, I was pretty sure I was an evangelical atheist by the time I was 15. And I knew deep down inside that I wasn't good priest material as a consequence. But that's kind of a tough thing to tell your parents. My grandparents took a lot of pride in the fact that I was at seminary.
So you didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice in the matter.
Well, my parents might say, well, you chose to go, but no 11-year-old chooses something like that. I don't think. And I certainly didn't. When did I decide what I wanted to do with my life? Actually, I can't think of any point where I had a determination to do a specific thing.
Interesting. So you went at 11, and then you said by 15 you knew you were an evangelical atheist, and you had to keep up the charade for a while, did you?
Yes, I did. I did. When I eventually told my parents, it came as no surprise to my dad. My dad was a hard-working car mechanic, but he was a good judge of people. And he knew that I was doing this for them, not for me. And they also knew that I would do anything to get out of having to go to the church, which really was a starter for 10, Chris. I think even a casual observer would have decided I wasn't the one.
So you basically kept up the charade, but then at some point, did you came clean, or did you just get to a point? Because I think seminary school, basically what happens is you join seminary school and then you're on a trajectory for priesthood, essentially, for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I was the one that all my friends at seminary felt was the one most likely to make it all the way.
What's all the way? Priesthood?
Yeah, neutral bifter. But I knew inside myself, and I think I still have two close friends from back then, and I think they knew pretty much that my heart wasn't in it. My intellect wasn't in it. It didn't work for me on any level whatsoever. And so when I decided to leave.
And so you kind of landed in high school, 17 or so, and not a Scooby, just...
Not a Scooby.
And so what happened? You finished school, and then what was the trajectory from there?
Yeah, listen, I would love to describe to you some gently and emerging vocation in life, but I can't. My mum was a psychiatric nurse at the time, and she worked in the local psychiatric hospital near where we lived. And I got a summer job as a nursing assistant in this psychiatric hospital because I needed some money. I wanted to buy a bass guitar because I thought it looked cool. I couldn't play it, but these are details. So I got a summer job and I got my bass guitar and went back to finish the next year at school and got a summer job again. And my mum said, well, you're pretty good at this. She reckoned, why don't you apply to do your, become a student psychiatric nurse. So I just kind of fell into it.
I mean, what did that summer job entail as a psychiatric nurse? What were you getting up to?
Well, as a care assistant, you would be attached to a ward in the hospital. The ones I can remember, there was one full of unfortunate men who had Alzheimer's and such. And then I worked in a ward which had some people of limited mental ability and a wide range of social skills or lack thereof. So you just really spent all day trying to organize their lives, But I didn't find it particularly challenging. I thought it was, I could do it. There are a lot of people who can't do it, so I suppose I had a head start. And certainly they took me on as a student nurse in the South Lothian College of Nursing and Midwifery. And took me on straight away. So I found myself a qualified psychiatric nurse working in Edinburgh without actually thinking that I'd made any decision to arrive there at all. It was crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure that being a nurse, you've probably got some fascinating tales, I'm sure, from.
Probably a bit. Yeah. So at the bright old age of 21, I might have been 22, I'd found myself working shifts in the Royal Edinburgh Hospital, had a locked ward, and because I was a staff nurse at this point, fully qualified psychiatric nurse, I had a badge telling everybody that I was fully qualified. And in fact, I didn't have a first idea of what I was doing. But I would find myself in charge of this locked ward in the Royal Edinburgh Hospital. And it had 15 beds, and the most disturbed people in Edinburgh, male and female, were all locked up in the same ward at the same time. And you can imagine it's not a recipe for peace and quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember a couple of situations where he had one poor chap was in who was labouring under the belief that he was Jesus Christ. And whilst he was quite mad, unfortunately that afternoon, another Jesus Christ got admitted. And you can imagine none of them were so bereft of knowledge of the Bible and how the story should have gone. But both of them were pretty sure there could only be one Jesus Christ. That be the other was obviously an imposter and must be disposed of forthwith.
Oh wow! So there was a battle of the Jesuses.
There's no doubt about it. And I remember I was in the duty room was the one end of a long corridor, and the door into the ward was at the other. And we were having a lively day, as was pretty usual. When this second guy was brought in, and what he'd done is he'd taken a white bed sheet and cut a hole out the middle. And the door swung open, and this guy was standing at the far end of the corridor with his arms out, welcoming his flock. And I remember just thinking it was almost like a mirage or something, or like a hallucination that a celestial figure had just turned up at the far end of the ward. Anyway, it all kicked off after that when the other Jesus saw him. But then that.
I guess there's in a place like that, you've probably got to not always go by the book. You've got to find your own solutions a lot of the time, right?
Yeah, you've just got to just get through the day, whatever. There's a lot of serious analysis going on of people's psychiatric conditions and stuff, but actually you spent the day just trying to keep the peace.
You started on this track of almost being a priest,
Mm-hmm.
fell into psychiatric nurse,
Absolutely.
medic 1, and then kind of just give us a very quick version of the entire thing up until today, just to give us a very abbreviated version of things.
Yeah. So the word that I've described was known as the intensive psychiatric care unit, and I decided that once I'd done that, I probably didn't want to go into any other part of psychiatry, so I applied to do my general nursing, which was a qualification I would need to work in a general hospital. And I always had my eye on accident and emergency as being somewhere I wanted to work. But my first
What
job...
is that?
it'll become obvious to you, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, actually. I like helping. I like challenges in fast-moving situations, So,
Yeah.
and actually,
Life and death.
certainly that. And I think year and a half leading up to that, I worked in anaesthetics and intensive care in the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh, and that was a pretty exciting job as well. But accident emergency was, especially in Edinburgh at the time, was the cutting edge of trauma care.
Mm.
And I just wanted to be part of it. Wanted to test myself in these difficult environment, a very difficult environment.
It's really interesting because some people, I guess if you interviewed a lot of people in the medical industry, they might say, oh, I got into this because I wanted to take care of people, or, I wanted to try and help the world or whatever. But, that might be part of your answer. But really, it's like you just wanted a thrill. You wanted something that,
I know that
got your heart rate going.
That reflects really badly on me, but I'll take it on the chin.
No. What I'm saying is that I reckon that you're not the only one. I reckon that's the stock answer for a lot of people, but it might not be the actual true answer, is what I was getting at. Because it's an exciting place to be.
Yes, it is. But also, like the fuller answer would be, I knew I was able to work in these environments. I knew I'd be okay. And that the main motivating factor was you make the difference between people surviving and not surviving. So there was a large part of it was a desire to provide public service, to don't be over biblical about it, but to help your fellow man at a time where they really needed somebody to keep their shit together. And I was quite sure I was that guy, And there are lots like me. It's not just me, but I knew it would be a challenging environment, and I knew I could work there, and I knew that there would be times where that would make the difference between people who I didn't know living and dying. So that was a part of it was to care for people in difficult circumstances.
And how did you handle it? I guess there's always the first time someone dies, on the table or near you, or because of you potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
I mean, what was it like the first? What was the first time? How was that?
Listen, I'm happy to put on the record that I don't think I've actually ever killed anybody.
Well, that would put you in a difficult position with your later career.
But there were times that there was nothing you could do to save somebody. And I found that difficult because it was kind of almost like a rejection of your skills and abilities to actually lose somebody, because actually the people I worked with, and I worked with some of the best trauma surgeons and nurses, I think, anywhere in the world. And we fancied our chances of saving everybody. So when the time came and it didn't happen, we were all gutted, we were pretty much devastated. We'd become introspective, kind of look at our performance, almost like a post-match analysis of what had happened. But that's because we felt it. We felt that actually we'd let somebody down. Whereas in fact, I don't think anybody, if we couldn't save anybody, I don't think it was possible to save them.
Do you remember the first time?
I can't really, because I've seen a lot of death in both of my careers, and there's nothing terribly memorable about it. People can die quietly and just look like they're sleeping, and people can die because they've just been hit by a bus, and they look dramatically different, but nothing really sticks. No individual sticks in my mind. I can't remember the first time. I think the first dead person I saw was my grandfather when I was about 13. And then when I started, I saw some people dying. when I did my psychiatry, and again when I did intensive care, it was actually quite a usual feature of your day that somebody would make it.
You're talking about the amount of death that you've witnessed at that time. That's obviously a low point, but what are the high points in that job?
Well, the high points were working with an amazing group of people, and you all had your eyes on the prize. Everybody wanted the exact same outcome. You learn how to do something that's really difficult with the very best. It becomes easier because of the skills and the knowledge that they've imparted to you.
I guess a little bit further back, we talk about Medic One. You're in accident A&E, trauma care unit, emergency nurse. Just tell us, what is Medic One for? Because a lot of people have no idea what this thing is. What do they do?
Plus, the evolution of out of hospital care now is unrecognizable now to what it was back then. But then there were no paramedics. And what Dr. Little had done is that he had decided that rather than, because I don't want to be disparaging of the actions of ambulance crews back then, and we're talking 1985, it was pretty much a scoop and run policy. You come across somebody who's been injured on the street, pretty much get them scooped up and get them into hospital as soon as possible. But if you've had a cardiac arrest, or you've just fallen off a building or been hit by a fast moving car, you need the best care and you need it immediately. Little knew this. So they purchased a van and kitted it out with all the emergency gear, and the van stood outside the accident emergency department, and it was called Medic One. In fact, I'll send you a photograph of me standing at Medic One with my uniform on and the necessary stethoscope around my neck.
Love it.
Just to give you a laugh. And it was the only out of hospital emergency response team. I think in Scotland or the UK, I think the States were a wee bit ahead of that as a notion, but Keith Little wanted to take the research room to the people rather than bring the people to the research room. And that was pretty edgy at the time.
And you'd be called out to what kind of events?
As we'll come on to, I ended up down at Lockerbie because I was rostered as the Medic One staff nurse on that day. So, but the more usual use of Medic One would be either cardiac arrest. I remember one occasion where a guy was stabbed in the heart.
So really just absolute emergencies that they don't have time to go and drive out there, pick him up and bring him back. You have to bring the hospital to them, kind of thing.
Very severe car crashes, really bad car crashes. We'd go out to a lot of those. And it would be called out only about 3 or 4 times a week. It wasn't,
Okay. It was a daily thing.
A couple of times a day, but that would be unusual.
And I guess that brings us on to, there was thankfully something like Medic One on the day of the Lockerbie bombing. And I don't know if you can just take us through. We were coming on to the main chunk of the story here, but just take it from every single moment from the start of that day until everything. Just tell us how it went.
Yeah, it was 21st of December, 1988. Your Auntie Irene's birthday, and don't you forget it.
Don't ever forget it. Never have, never will.
And I'd got a big bunch of flowers. They were sitting in one of the sinks in the back room of the accident emergency department. I was on a back shift, which was kind of 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock at night. I was on for Medic 1. I was the Medic 1 guy, so if Medic 1 got called out, the routine was that the most senior doctor, a junior doctor, and the rostered staff nurse would go out as the Medic 1 team. And we would all jump in this vehicle and head out to whatever it was. And it was an unremarkable day. The phone went in the area that I was working in. The phone went, and it must have been about between 7:15 and 7:30 that night. One of the assistant emergency doctors. I think he was from Dublin, but he was a notorious prankster. And it was him on the phone, and I answered the phone call. He said, "Right, Tony, I don't know what you're going to do with this piece of information, but it's important." And I said, "Okay, yeah, let's hear it, you know. I think I came down with yesterday's rain, you know." Anyway, I've just been watching the Channel 4 news, and there's something flashed up saying that there's been a jumbo jet crashed in the Scottish borders. You know, and I said, "Away you go," you know, not falling for that old chestnut, you know. And I remember he said in the coldest tones that really caused me to snap to attention. He said, "Tony, if you never ever believe me about anything ever again, believe me now."
Wow.
Yeah. I'd absolutely stopped me in my tracks. Dr. Little, that I mentioned earlier, was in the department at the time, for a good thing. I used to call him the boss because that's what you do when he's the boss. And he was standing chatting to one of the senior sisters outside his office. And I saw them standing there, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go and tell them, and we can discuss what we do about it. Anyway, in the boss's office was a red telephone. You know, the old-fashioned telephones with the dials on it.
Yeah, the rotary phones. Yeah.
Bright red, sat at his desk, and it was the hotline, literally, to Lothian Borders Police Headquarters.
Wow.
And it was there for, you know, speed of communication. If something serious was going down, this was how the police would contact the A&E department. And it had never rang. Never.
They didn't use it.
No, none of the staff could ever remember the red telephone ringing.
Wow.
So I walked up to Keith Little, and Maggie White was the name of the senior sister. And I said to them pretty much what Chris had said to me. I said to them, "Liz, I don't know what to make of this, but you're as well hearing it. And where it goes from here, I don't know." I said, "But I've just spoken to Chris Luke. He says that he's heard on the Channel 4 news that a jumbo jet has crashed in the borders." And both looked at me as if I was daft. And then the phone rang.
Wow. So
Yeah.
Channel 4 knew before anybody else.
Well, I'm not sure how that happened, but that was the sequence of events. So I'm thinking it would maybe take the police 10 or 15 minutes to try and get their heads round before they picked up their red phone.
Yeah.
But I remember the three of us standing out in the corridor, turning towards the ringing phone with a look of absolute astonishment on our faces.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
And of course, the boss answered the phone, and what I had just said to him was confirmed by the police. And they were requesting that the Medic 1 was mobilized because they were not sure what was going on, but they knew it was big. And you might think Scottish Borders is a good old distance from Edinburgh, but you've been to our home. It's 30 miles south of Edinburgh, and Lockerbie is maybe another 40 miles on from that. So geographically, it was right in the middle of cities that could respond. Carlisle, Newcastle,
Carlisle,
Glasgow, Edinburgh. Manchester stretch. So we were actually in pole position, but we were also the only out of hospital response team.
Yeah. None of those other major cities had
I
anything.
don't think so. No,
paramedic?
my recollection is no, they hadn't.
Wow.
But I think why the police were so interested in us was because we had our vehicle that had all our emergency kit already loaded onto it. And there were also boxes in the A&E department, which were the major incident boxes. And in that were emergency supplies in the event of a major incident. And there were, boxes packed full of intravenous fluids and bandages and airways, you can imagine, full of gear. So that's what...
So you load up the van.
Got all off, yeah.
So it was you, Keith?
Yeah, me, Keith Little. So how it panned out wasn't the standard response would be we'd all jump in the van.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't going to be good enough because we were talking Lockerbie here and it was, a fair old drive away. So
What time of day is this again? This is evening, right? It's nighttime.
Yeah, it's 7:30 in the evening.
Yeah, it's dark.
Yeah, it was dark, cold, wintry night, and a horrible night.
Yeah. It was sort of blowing a gale and rain and hail and all sorts. Yeah,
it was really, really unpleasant. And of course, in true fashion, we had all the emergency gear, but we didn't have a box that had extreme weather clothing for the staff in it.
You just had your overalls and whatever you brought from the street.
Yeah, my coat over the top. So we were woefully unprepared for the weather, but the police quickly came up with a plan, and that was to divide a Medic 1 team in two, because obviously we weren't going to send a skeleton crew. There was 2 consultants, 2 registrars, and 2 nurses went. 3 nurses went. And Keith Little and Dave Steedman were 2 of the doctors, and Maggie White decided that they would travel by helicopter.
That's brave. That's brave in those kind of weather.
In the weather, yeah. And the other half of the team would be taken down in a police traffic car. A high-speed road journey.
Yeah.
What
about the van? But you need the van with all the gear, right?
Well, no, we had to... The van was an old Bedford van, Chris. It had a top speed of about 60. We had the full expectation that one of the fuels would come off. There was no money invested in this kind of stuff at the time. It was cutting edge, but it was...
It's a shoestring thing.
Yes, very much. Very much. So we took the gear out of Medic 1, apportioned it between the 2 teams, got the major incident boxes out, apportioned them between the 2 teams, and I don't know if you know where the old Royal Infirmary is in Edinburgh. It's at the top of a path called Middle Meadow Walk, and there's a big park in the middle of Edinburgh called the Meadows.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems within 15 minutes or so, it may have taken longer, but I don't think significantly longer. A helicopter had landed in the Meadows.
Wow.
And our porters and whatnot relayed all the equipment down to the helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time, a white police Range Rover pulled up, in a cloud of blue smoke at the door. And we chucked, those of us who went by car, chucked our gear in as much as we could get in the back of the Range Rover, and we jumped in. So there was me and Lorna Sloan, both nurses. There was Colin Robertson, who was one of the A&E consultants, and a guy called Steve Cusack, a Dubliner, who was an A&E registrar. But there would be a senior doctor who was usually in training or recently qualified as a trauma expert.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you guys all bundle in the police Range Rover, gear in hand.
Yep.
And then what were you? Obviously, it's probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. Drive.
Well, it would have been, but the police driver, and I remember his nickname was Titch, because he wasn't very tall. And
Wow.
but boy, that boy was some driver, let me tell you. I don't think he dipped below
Really?
100 miles an hour
Oof.
at any point. And you know what a Range Rover's like? I know because your father
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
I mean, you roll about in them, but this guy's
Yeah.
flinging this Range Rover around
Oof.
corners and round roundabouts. And he quite rightly decided that the quickest way to get to Lockerbie was not to take the small roads down through the borders, which you're familiar with. He said we take the M8 to Glasgow and then we take the M74 south. And that's the route.
Oh, because you can just pelt it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. Bizarrely, because of the weather conditions, the team that left in the helicopter didn't arrive until after we arrived. We were quicker
Wow.
by road
Wow.
than the helicopter had been in the storm that night.
Because the helicopter was just probably flying as a crow flies.
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
guys had a detour.
Straight line.
Jeez.
Right.
And what was that car ride like? That must have been
It was crazy. It was terrifying. It was terrifying on a lot of levels. So we were scared about what we were going to, because by this time some information was coming through. It was a jumbo jet and it was really bad.
That's all you had. It was really bad.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We had no details whatsoever. We didn't have numbers or anything, but we thought a jumbo jet, a passenger jumbo jet, it's going to be carnage. We knew that. And we were terrified, and so there was the physical terror of hurtling through the night in this white torpedo ridden by a wee Freddie Mercury, which was bad enough. But we were also trying to reassure each other that actually, if we stick to training, then we can do our best here.
Yeah.
And it's always the biggest challenge that an accident emergency or a trauma nurse or doctor has is when you bite off the big one, have you got what it takes? And I think we all felt that this was the biggest one ever. And we didn't really know if we could function in these circumstances or not. So there was a lot of personal reassurance going on. Some of the discussion was led by Colin Robertson, the consultant, and he was quite keen to focus us on our priorities of life saving. And whilst we had seen a lot of trauma between the lot of us and seen a lot of death, we'd never seen anything on this scale. And I don't think there's anything to prepare you for that, except what Colin Robertson was rightly saying was, remember the basics of resuscitation. Let's not change what we know, because actually more than ever, this is the time we need it.
Yeah. Basics.
Yeah. So that was all going on when said driver missed the turn off for a while at 100 miles an hour. And I'm not exaggerating saying that. Realized his mistake, jammed on the brakes and pulled the handbrake.
What?
Flipped the car around very expertly, 180 degrees, and then floored it and shot back up the wrong way up the motorway until he got back to the tunnel. It was very exciting.
You want adrenaline. You got your adrenaline.
Absolutely. Coming out our ears,
Jeez.
And so we were passing a minibus full of coppers, full of police officers who had been scrambled from Glasgow and were heading down the M74 in a minivan. And so our guy wound his window down, the passenger side front window got wound down. Said Freddie pulled the Range Rover over right beside the police van, and the driver of the van had wound his window down. And we got an updated account of what was going on by two police officers shouting at each other at 100 miles an hour, going down 2 lanes of a motorway.
Oh, I thought you'd stopped, but you guys you're still
No.
driving 100 miles an hour, shouting each other
Yeah,
through
it's
the
still
window.
going. Yep. What's going on? Aye, it's
Oh,
bad.
man.
Hundreds of people, fires, so we generally got the gist of it.
So you were building a pretty clear picture of what you were heading into by this point. You're thinking, this is bad,
yeah,
really bad.
and when we arrived at Lockerbie, we could actually see from a wee distance away fires burning.
Like a few miles out kind of thing.
Yeah. And of course, in the course of the journey, we'd already had this discussion that our biggest danger is going to be aircraft fuel, because it's going to be a pretty full load of jet fuel would have been involved.
Because for anyone who doesn't know, the Lockerbie flight was taking off from London and going to New York. Is that right? So it'd only been in the air for about 40 minutes.
Yeah. It took off at 6:25 that evening from Heathrow, and it went missing from the radar at 7:02 that evening. So that's how long it had been in the air.
So it was filled almost to the brim with jet fuel.
Fuel and people, as it turned out.
People.
And so we'd already had this discussion about the highly dangerous situation of having all this fuel. This time we didn't really know if the plane had landed and had crashed intact, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
A crash landing that had gone wrong, or what it was. So we're trying to suppose where all the dangers were coming from, but that was certainly one of them. And we actually arrived at, if you look up other accounts of this, you'll see that an engine and a wing, I think a wing as well, landed on some houses. I think it's Sherwood Crescent in Lockerbie, and 2 or 3 houses completely disappeared. There was a massive crater.
Mm-hmm.
Houses were on fire. Cars were on fire on the motorway. There was debris everywhere. And this is what we arrived at.
Yeah.
And it was almost apocalyptic. It was, it was something we actually couldn't have imagined. It looked like a film set.
Yeah.
And there was, firemen were trying to put out some of the fires. There was no casualties to be seen, which was really our only interest. That and staying alive. And a fire officer came over and said, "There's nothing here for you. If you go back up into Lockerbie," the police had set up a headquarters, like a mobile headquarters.
Yeah.
And so go back into Lockerbie and find that. That's the only advice I can give you. But that wasn't before we had pulled a very quick stop, and we'd all jumped out with our cases, our Medic 1 cases. And I don't mind telling you, I was terrified. I absolutely bottled it. And then I realised that everybody else had as well, because it was a scene that I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So we said, right, okay, so we gathered ourselves and got back in the car, and were taken into Lockerbie town itself. And by this time there was some order starting to emerge. There was a smell of fuel. And it was running down the gutters.
Oh, really?
It was insane. There was wreckage lying around. There were some bodies to be seen, So like we knew that from where the houses had been flattened, if there wasn't any casualties in this house, they'd be so lucky. But in fact, we also knew there'd be nothing to be found of them.
Just crushed.
Yeah.
So is it the first casualties you saw were not the locals?
Well, my recollection is there are some forms to be seen lying on the ground, which we took to be bodies, but we didn't look at those because others had. the local ambulance man at the police. And everybody was starting to man up. Don't get me wrong, this wasn't a limited response in any way whatsoever. Every emergency response within a radius of 50 miles was legging it towards Lockerbie.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. It was a massive response, and a massive response was required. But there was complete chaos. The ambulance service didn't, I think at that point, have a centre set up. The police did, and the fire brigade did, but I don't think they were talking to each other meaningfully at that point. Everybody's absolutely doing their best in the most trying of circumstances.
Bedlam. It's bedlam.
Absolute bedlam. And all you could really do is react to what you were told with the capacity that you had. So we're going to set up emergency ward 10 somewhere, so you're just reacting to what was going on. So we were standing outside the Range Rover, which was outside the police, I think, emergency van or whatever it was they had. When a car pulled up, and it was a local GP, and he said he had just driven over the hill, and he said that he saw some white debris on top of the hill, which we now know was Thundergarth Hill, and he saw some white debris up there. And Colin Robertson, who was in charge of us, made the decision, said, right, okay, you get back in your car and take us there. Because if there's debris up there, there's going to be passengers.
Other things.
Yes.
Yeah, passengers.
And that's what happened. The GP jumped in his car, started heading back up this narrowy road, going up a hill just outside Lockerbie, with us behind him and a couple of ambulances who had tumbled onto the fact that we were the Medic 1 team and that we were doing something. They thought, having a bit of that. And that's how it happened. And it wasn't any more complex than that. People just were looking to see what they could meaningfully do. Yeah. And that was no more sophisticated than that. We had no idea what we were going to. No idea. Anyway, we got to the top of this hill, and the GP stopped his car and he pointed over this dry stone dike into this field, and sure enough, we could pick out some debris there. So the field gate was opened, and our vehicle was the first in, and it was a Range Rover. It was perfectly suited to the terrain. It was absolutely fine. Headlights on full beam as we turned into this field. And what we saw was, in the arc of light, imagine a wide arc of a full beam Range Rover, green grass. It hadn't been snowing, but the grass was green. And there were sheep, lots of sheep. And as the vehicle turned round and the light, and this was the only light that we had, because there was no street lights or anything. We were on a hill in the countryside. Yeah. And as it turned round, what I saw was grass and sheep, and grass and sheep. Cockpit of a jumbo jet. Lying on its side in the field right in front of us.
All right, that is where we're going to leave it for part 1 of this episode. Part 2 will be available next Monday, so please subscribe now so you don't miss out. And in that episode, Tony takes us through the rest of his Lockerbie experience and his later career shift into criminal law, and some of the amazing and grisly murder cases he was working on. He also reflects on his many jobs and shares some great advice for anyone interested in similar paths. A huge thanks to Tony for taking the time to share his story with us, and a huge thanks to you for listening. For photos, links, and more about this episode, head to noordinarymonday.com and look for the episodes page. You can also find us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and more. You can find all them at No Ordinary Monday on Linktree. Come and join the conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do 2 really quick things. Give us a 5-star rating and review and tell a friend. That's it. It really helps us grow the show, attract more amazing guests, and inspire new listeners. This episode was produced, hosted, and edited by me, Chris Barron. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and have a great Monday, everyone.